Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritya Naram Narottam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Tirine Nashtaprayeshu Vardhareshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevayam Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhakti Bhagavati Nashtaki. So continuing with the discussion on Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita by Srila Goswami, Volume 3, Only He Could Lead Them, San Francisco, India, 1967. Chapter 22nd, Swami Invites the Hippies. So Prabhupada had landed in San Francisco, and at the airport, about 50 hippies came with Mukunda and Ravindra Swarup Ram to welcome Prabhupada. The temple Mukunda and his friends had obtained was on Frederick Street in the Haight Ashbury district. Like the temple at 26 Second Avenue in New York, it was a small storefront with a display window facing the street. A sign over the window read Shri Shri Radha Krishna Temple. Mukunda and his friends had also rented a 3-room apartment for Swamiji on the 3rd floor of the adjoining building. It was a small, bare, rundown apartment facing the street. So bare means no furniture, not new apartment, is old place, but that's all they could afford. Followed by several carloads of devotees and curious seekers, Srila Prabhupada arrived at 518 Frederick Street and entered the storefront, which was decorated only by a few Madras cloths on the wall. Taking his seat on a cushion, he led a kirtan and then spoke, "Invite everyone to take up Krishna consciousness." After his lecture, he left the storefront and walked next door and up the 2 flights of stairs to his apartment. As he entered his apartment, number 32, he was followed not only by his devotees and admirers, but also by reporters from San Francisco's main newspapers, the Chronicle and the Examiner. While some devotees cooked his lunch and rancho and packed his suitcase, Swamiji talked with the reporters, who sat on the floor taking notes on the pads. Reporter: Downstairs you said you were inviting everyone to Krishna consciousness. Does that include the Haight Ashbury Bohemians and Beatniks, means they are the various hippie groups? Prabhupada: Yes, everyone, including you or anybody else, be he or she what is called an acid head or a hippie or something else. But once he is accepted for training, he becomes something else from what he had been before. Reporter: What does one have to do to become a member of your movement? Prabhupada: There are 4 prerequisites. I do not allow my students to keep girlfriends. I prohibit all kinds of intoxicants, including coffee, tea, and cigarettes. I prohibit meat eating, and I prohibit my students from taking part in gambling. Reporter: Do these shall not commandments extend to the use of LSD, marijuana, and other narcotics? Prabhupada: I consider LSD to be an intoxicant. I do not allow any one of my students to use that or any intoxicant. I train my students to rise early in the morning, to take a bath early in the day, and to attend prayer meetings 3 times a day. Our sect is one of austerity. It's the science of God. Although Prabhupada had found that reporters generally did not report his philosophy, he took the opportunity to teach Krishna consciousness. Even if the reporters didn't want to delve into the philosophy, his followers did. The big mistake of modern civilization, Srila Prabhupada continued, is to encroach upon others' property as though it were one's own. This creates an unnatural disturbance. God is the ultimate proprietor of everything in the universe. When people know that God is the ultimate proprietor, the best friend of all living entities, and the object of all offerings and sacrifices, then there will be peace. Otherwise, there cannot be any peace. The reporters asked him about his background, and he told briefly about his coming from India and beginning in New York. After the reporters left, Prabhupada continued speaking to the young people in his room. Mukunda, who had allowed his hair and beard to grow, but who wore around his neck the strand of large red beads Swamiji had given him at initiation, introduced some of his friends and explained that they were all living together and they wanted to help Swamiji present Krishna consciousness to the young people of San Francisco. Mukunda's wife Janaki asked Swamiji about his plane ride. He said it had been pleasant except for some pressure in his ears. The houses looked like matchboxes, he said, and with his thumb and forefinger indicated the size of a matchbox. So yeah, from the plane, this is how they look. Means how significant it all is. He leaned back against the wall and took off the garlands he had received from Day, only until a beaded necklace, a common, inexpensive item, with a small bell on it, remained hanging around his neck. Prabhupada held it, inspected the workmanship, and toyed with it. This is special, he said, looking up, because it was made with devotion. He continued to pay attention to the necklace as if receiving it had been one of the most important events of the day. When his lunch arrived, he distributed some to everyone, and then Ranchor efficiently, though tactlessly, asked everyone to leave and give the Swamiji a little time to eat and rest. Outside the apartment and in the storefront below, the talk was of Swamiji. No one had been disappointed. Everything Mukunda had been telling them about him was true. They particularly enjoyed how he had talked about seeing everything from Krishna's viewpoint. That night on television, Swamiji's arrival was covered on the 11 o'clock news, and the next day it appeared in the newspapers. The Examiner's story was on page 2. Swami invites the hippies, along with the photo of the temple filled with followers and some shots of Swamiji, who looked very grave. Prabhupada and Mukunda read the article aloud. The lanky master of the faith, Mukunda read, attired in a flowing ankle-long robe and sitting cross-legged on a big mattress. Swamiji interrupted. What is this word, lanky? Mukunda explained that it meant tall and slender. I don't know why they said that, he said. He added, maybe it's because you sit so straight and tall, so they think that we are very tall. The article went on to describe many of the airport greeters as being of the long-haired, bearded, and sandaled set. San Francisco's largest paper, the Chronicle, also ran an article. Swami in hippie land, holy man opens San Francisco temple. The article began, a holy man from India, described by his friend and beat poet Allen Ginsberg as one of the more conservative leaders of his faith, launched a kind of evangelistic effort yesterday in the heart of San Francisco's hippie haven. Srila Prabhupada objected to being called conservative. He was indignant. Conservative? How is that? In respect to sex and drugs, Mukunda suggested. Of course, we are conservative in that sense, Prabhupada said. That simply means we are following Shastra. We cannot depart from Bhagavad Gita. But conservative, we are not. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so strict that he would not even look on a woman. But we are accepting everyone into this movement, regardless of sex, caste, position, or whatever. Everyone is invited to come chant Hare Krishna. This is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's munificence, his liberality. No, we are not conservative. Srila Prabhupada rose from bed and turned on the light. It was 1 a.m. Although the alarm had not sounded and no one had come to wake him, he had risen on his own. The apartment was cold and quiet. Wrapping his chadar around his shoulders, he sat quietly at his makeshift desk, a trunk filled with manuscripts. And in deep connection, chanted the Hare Krishna mantra on his beats. After an hour of chanting, Srila Prabhupada turned to his writing. Although 2 years had passed since he had published a book, the third and final volume of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, he had daily been working, sometimes on his translation and commentary of the second canto, but mostly on Bhagavad Gita. In the 1940s in India, he had written an entire Bhagavad Gita translation and commentary, but his only copy had mysteriously disappeared. Then in 1965, after a few months in America, he had begun again, starting with the introduction, which he had composed in his room on 72nd Street in New York. Now thousands of manuscript pages filled his trunk, completing his Bhagavad Gita. If his New York disciple Haigreve, formerly an English professor, could edit it, and if some of the other disciples could get it published, that would be an important achievement. But publishing books in America seemed difficult, more difficult than in India. Even though in India he had been alone, he had managed to publish 3 volumes in 3 years. Here in America, he had many followers, but many followers meant increased responsibilities. And none of his followers as yet seemed seriously inclined to take up typing, editing, and dealing with American businessmen. Yet, despite the dim prospects of publishing his Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada had begun translating another book, Chaitanya Charitamrita, the principal Vaishnava scripture on the life and teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Putting on his reading glasses, Prabhupada opened his books and turned on the dictating machine. He studied the Bengali and Sanskrit texts, then picked up the microphone, flicked the switch to record, flashing on a small red light, and began speaking. While the Lord was going, chanting and dancing, he spoke no more than a phrase at a time, flicking the switch, pausing, and then dictating again. Thousands of people were following him, and some of them were laughing, some were dancing, and some singing. Some of them were falling on the ground, offering obeisances to the Lord. Speaking and pausing, clicking the switch on and off, he would sit straight, sometimes gently rocking and nodding his head as he urged forward his words. Or he would bend low over his books, carefully studying them through his reading glasses. An hour passed and Prabhupada worked on. The building was dark except for Prabhupada's lamp, and quiet except for the sound of his voice and the click and hum of the dictating machine. He wore a faded peach turtleneck jersey beneath his grey wool chadar, and since he had just risen from bed, his saffron dhoti was wrinkled. Without having washed his face or gone to the bathroom, he sat absorbed in his work. At least for these few rare hours, the street and the Radha Krishna temple were quiet. The situation with the night dark, the surroundings quiet, and him at his transcendental literary work was not much different from his early morning hours in his room at the Radha Damodar temple in Vrindavan, India. There, of course, he had no dictating machine, but he had worked during the same hours from the same text, Chaitanya Charitamrita. So, see, because of his absorption so much in Krishna and his work and his service, there was no difference between Radha Damodar temple in Vrindavan and Radha Krishna temple. And this Radha Krishna temple, we read, is just a storefront and no deities, no other paraphernalia. But since Prabhupada was there, it is non-different. There, of course, he had no dictating. Once he had begun a verse-by-verse translation with commentary, and another time he had written essays on the text, now having just arrived in his corner of the world, so remote from the scenes of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. He was beginning the first chapter of a new English version of Chaitanya Charitamrita. He called it Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. He was following what had become a vital routine in his life, rising early and writing the parampara message of Krishna consciousness, putting aside all other considerations, disregarding present circumstances. He would merge into the timeless message of transcendental knowledge. This was his most important service to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. The thought of producing more books and distributing them widely inspired him to rise every night and translate. Prabhupada worked until dawn. Then he stopped and prepared himself to go down to the temple for the morning meeting. So same routine, and this he continued. He continued, whether he traveled internationally, outside America, until 1977, till he left his body. Amazing. And that is why we got so many precious books with his commentaries or purports. Then that's why we can understand the philosophy. Otherwise, there was no other way possible for us. If you ever get a chance to read Baldev Vidyabhushan, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj was very tough. His English is very tough to understand. Even though other acharyas cannot understand. Prabhupada made it so simple. Though some of the New York disciples had objected, Srila Prabhupada was still scheduled for the mantra rock dance at the Avalon Ballroom. It wasn't proper, they had said, for the devotees out in San Francisco to ask their spiritual master to go to such a place. It would mean amplified guitars, pounding drums, wild light shows, and hundreds of drugged hippies. How could his pure message be heard in such a place? So Avalon Ballroom, Mukunda and others, they had arranged a mantra rock dance with all the heavy metal groups. And let's see how it ends up. But in San Francisco, Mukunda and others had been working on the mantra rock dance for months. It would draw thousands of young people, and the San Francisco Radhakrishna temple stood to make thousands of dollars. So although among his New York disciples, Prabhupada had expressed uncertainty, he now said nothing to deter the enthusiasm of his San Francisco followers. Sam Speerstra, Mukunda's friend and one of Mantra Rock organizers, explained the idea to Hagrid, who had just arrived from New York. There's a whole new school of San Francisco music opening up. The Grateful Dead have already cut their first record. Their offer to do this dance is a great publicity booth just when we need it. But Swamiji says that even Ravi Shankar is in Maya. Hagrid said, oh, that it's all been arranged, Sam assured him. All the bands will be on stage and Allen Ginsberg will introduce Swamiji to San Francisco. Swamiji will talk and then chant Hare Krishna with the bands joining in. Then he leaves. There should be around 4,000 people here. Srila Prabhupada knew he would not compromise himself. He would go, chant, and then leave. The important thing was to spread the chanting of Hare Krishna. If thousands of young people gathering to hear rock music could be engaged in hearing and chanting the names of God, then what was the harm? As a preacher, Prabhupada was prepared to go anywhere to spread Krishna consciousness. Since chanting Hare Krishna was absolute, one who heard or chanted the names of Krishna, anyone, anywhere, in any condition, could be saved from falling to the lower species in the next life. These young hippies wanted something spiritual, but they had no direction. They were confused, accepting hallucinations as spiritual visions, but they were seeking genuine spiritual life, just like many of the young people on the Lower East Side. Prabhupada decided he would go. His disciples wanted him to, and he was their servant and the servant of Lord Chaitanya. Mukunda, Sam, and Harvey Cohen had already met with rock entrepreneur Chet Helms, who had agreed that they could use his Avalon Ballroom, and that if they could get the bands to come, everything above the cost for the groups, the security, and few other basics would go as profit for the San Francisco Radhakrishna temple. Mukunda and Sam had then gone calling on the music groups, most of whom lived in the Bay Area, and one after another, the exciting new San Francisco rock bands, the Grateful Dead, Moby Grape, Big Brother and the Holding Company, Jefferson Airplane, Quicksilver Messenger Service, had agreed to appear with Swami Bhaktivedanta for the minimum wage of $250 per group, and Allen Ginsberg had agreed. The lineup was complete. So $250, nothing for all these big groups. Otherwise, they would charge thousands or millions of dollars. In San Francisco, every rock concert had an art poster, most of them designed by the psychedelic artist called Mouse. One thing about Mouse's posters was that it was difficult to tell where the letters left off and the background began. He used dissonant colors that made his posters seem to flash on and off. Borrowing from this tradition, Harvey Cohen had created a unique poster, Krishna Consciousness Comes West, using red and blue concentric circles and a candid photo of Swamiji smiling in Tompkins Square Park. The devotees put the posters up all over town. Haigriv and Mukunda went to discuss a program for the mantra rock dance with Allen Ginsberg. Allen was already well known as an advocate of Hare Krishna mantra. In fact, acquaintances would often greet him with Hare Krishna. When he walked down Hyatt Street, and he was known to visit and recommend that others visit the Radha Krishna temple, Haigriv, whose full beard and long hair rivaled Allen's, was concerned about the melody Allen would use when he chanted with Swamiji. I think the melody you use, Haigriv said, is too difficult for good chanting. Maybe Allen can admit it, but that's the melody I first heard in India. A wonderful lady saint was chanting it. I'm quite accustomed to it, and it's the only one I can sing convincingly. With only a few days remaining before the mantra rock dance, Allen came to the early morning kirtan at the temple and later joined Srila Prabhupada upstairs in his room. A few devotees were sitting with Prabhupada, eating Indian sweets, when Allen came to the door. He and Prabhupada smiled and exchanged greetings, and Prabhupada offered him a sweet, remarking that Mr. Allen Ginsberg was up very early. Yes, Allen replied, the phone hasn't stopped ringing since I arrived in San Francisco. That is what happens when one becomes famous, said Prabhupada. That was the tragedy of Mahatma Gandhi also. Wherever he went, thousands of people would crowd upon him, chanting Mahatma Gandhi ki jai. The gentleman could not sleep. Well, at least it got me up for kirtan this morning, said Allen. Yes, that's good. The conversation turned to upcoming program at the Avalon Ballroom. Don't you think there's a possibility of chanting a tune that would be more appealing to Western ears? Any tune will do, Srila said Prabhupada. Melody is not important. What is important that you will chant Hare Krishna. It can be in the tune of your own country. That doesn't matter. Prabhupada and Allen also talked about the meaning of the word hippie, and Allen mentioned something about taking LSD. Prabhupada replied that LSD created dependence and was not necessary for a person in Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness resolves everything, Prabhupada said. Nothing else is needed. So next will be the Avalon Ballroom Mantra Rock Dance. So we'll take it up tomorrow. See anybody has any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Mata. Inshallah, you all have a safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna.